Welcome students of Form 1. We are talking about the following topic, family and kinship. And I've made a few videos about this topic already, still in the chapter Dimensions of Self. But we're now expanding our topic to our family, our kin, and all people that are related to us. And the main topic of this video is the generation gap. That's the main topic of the video right now. If we talk about the generation gap, it's important to look at the word gap. Aqui que está a unificação e a palavra gap. E mais ou menos a unificação aqui está buraco, like a hole, or distance. So there's like a distance, down distancia, between different generations. Yes, buraco of distancia, or distancia, actually. Yes, so that's the meaning of that word here, actually. The generation gap. Parents and children are in different generations. Generations. Beautiful, ain't it? Generations. Parents and grandparents are often referred to as the older generation. So you have the younger generation and you have the older generation, while children and younger people are the younger generation. Yeah, generation. While children and young people are the younger generation. Yes, so parents and children are in different generation groups when you look at them. Parents and grandparents are often referred to as the older generation, while children and young people are referred to as the young generation. Yes, so this is like the generation gap. Like you could just see it. You could see a parent with their children. You see two generations. Do you see also their grandparents? Nang wela e nang tawela. You see a third generation even. And even some families have even grandparents that also belong to that generation. So in the picture here, you see above that corner, sorry, you see two generations. You see probably, well, I see it correctly, you see young children here. That's one generation. Yes, and I think you see the grandparents you see here. Yes, so there are two different generations. Also here in this picture below, you see the parents and you see their children. Here you see the parents in the background. It's one generation, but their children is the youngest generation. That's two. Yeah, and these would be then grandparents. That would be like a third generation. And if your grandparents are still alive, that's even a fourth generation. And parents and children are in different generations. Parents and grandparents are often regarded as the older generation, while children and young people are the young generation. Yes, well, the youngest generation grows up and becomes adolescents, and they have their own view on life, their own choices that they make, their own thoughts about what is a good life, how to live my life, their own thoughts about drug use, relationships, marriage, sexuality, going out, clothing, dealing with the partner, dealing with women or with men. So they often have their own opinion about what is important and what is the norm. Remember that word? What is the norm and what is normal in life? So they have other opinion about these things than the older generations, the parents and the grandparents. And from this, a conflict can arise. So you can get a conflict, a big conflict, un conflict chiqui, un conflict grandi. And this conflict can mean a fight or a disagreement or a difference in opinion, but also can mean like a separation from the parents or the grandparents. Yes, so a conflict, an argument between the generations can arise, can happen for a number of reasons, including different ideas and values, opinions about what is the right way to behave, understandings, the ideas about what is current and fashionable, almost literally like looking at fashion, what do you wear? Taste in music is always different between different generations. Fashion, culture, politics, what political party you vote for, what are your political ideas, where should the future of the country go to, and attitudes to drugs and sex. Values are valornan. So what do you find important in life? Is that God? Is that friendship? Is that caring for nature? Is that enjoying life? Those are values. Yeah, ding otto palavra valornan. And also the right way to behave, we talked about this before in an earlier video, is comportación moral. What is right and what is wrong? And kikita e comportación bom e kikita e comportación malo. Yes, so comportación moral. And when you have a generational conflict, you and your parents or you and your grandparents have a conflict about one of these topics that you see here. Yes, so each of these can give a conflict between different generations. Yes, and the conflict can be very large, but it can also be like a minor disagreement. But that minor disagreement can become bigger and bigger until you have a huge fight or a huge disagreement or a huge clash against between different generations. Yes. Well, one of the things that you see here is that each generation lives and grows up and is formed in a different context. Yeah. The other generation is brought up with reading a book, reading a newspaper, and the current generation is brought up with being online all of the time and on their phone. Their phone is a very crucial part of the life. Nam telefoon ta hopi importante ding nang viva. Yes? In their lives, el teléfono está hopi important. Pero the other generation, they had newspapers, they had 8 to 5 jobs, their dealings, when they would go out, they always would do that with their wife. So their context, the world, and the technology, and the fashion, and the norms were totally different. That's what you see, what I hope you see in the picture here, in the generation here, and the generation here, that their surroundings and contexts are literally different. Why do people have a generation gap? So reason, kikita e razón di buraco di generación. Yeah, the distancia di generación. One of the reasons for the generation gap is that each generation is brought up within the context of a set of values. I've used the word just a minute ago, just a second ago actually. The context. So your parents or your grandparents didn't grow up in 100% the same culture and 100% the same world as we do, as you do actually. So when I grew up in the 90s, the music was different. How boys and girls treated each other was different. The language was different. The slang was different. The fashion was way different. So in the 90s, when I was a teenager, the whole context were different. And I'm not even talking about the fact that I grew up in another country. Context in which I grew up. So what were the norms? Kikita e comportación moral. Yeah. Kikita e comportación bom. Kikita e fashion bom. Kikita e palavra bom. This what are the right words? What's the right fashion? How did we treat the women? Those were very different from what we find now normal. Yes. So these values, valornan, in norms, change, it cambia ding un tempo. Yeah. El tempo da passa, the time passes, and the values, valornan, and norms, kikita normal, is kita cambia. Ding un tempo di mas anyana. Yeah. So what was thought to be unacceptable at one stage becomes tolerated or even thought of as being the norm. So what was not normal 20 years ago, perhaps it is now. And because I'm older, I'm becoming 40 this year when I'm making this video, what was normal for me, or what not was not normal for me, can be quite normal for my children, yes, or the other way around. So there's a context in which people grow up when they're young, when they're a teenager, when they're an adolescent, when they're a young adult. But nowadays, those norms, comportación moral, comportación normal, norm, barnornan, ideanan a cambia. That's why there's a generation gap. Yeah, the set of values and norms have changed over time. Values, valornan in norms, por cambia ding un tempo di aena. In a matter of years, these norms and ideas and behaviors of people can change, and that's why we get a generation gap. I hope that's clear. Yes, an example is, for instance, that 50 years ago, it was pretty normal for a teacher to smoke in the classroom. You could smoke everywhere. This idea, a valor aquí a cambia. We don't do that anymore because we know smoking makes you sick. But also, like 100 years ago, it was not polite to show your affection, bo amor, yeah, bo stima, your love, to another person physically. So it wasn't allowed to kiss a woman even on the cheek. Yes, these norms have changed also. And also fashion, although it comes back sometimes, nowadays fashion is totally different from those from the 90s or the 70s, the 50s, and earlier. Yes, and these things, ideas about how to behave in public, what is normal, yeah, these ideas belong to a certain context, to a certain time. Y context cambia. Yeah? Y comportación moral te cambia también. What can generations do to find common ground and to have less conflicts? Yeah? Kika por e generacionan por hasi. What can generations do to come together? Kika por e generacionan por hasi pa join junto. Another way in which generations may be able to find common ground significa un join nan balnornan, join nan ideanan, join junto, yeah, could be sharing an interest in history, but also in cultural heritage. This word has, yeah, I've used this word, sorry, more often, heritage. And heritage means actually what is passed down to you from one generation to the other, your heritage. It can be your language, e portabo idioma, e portabo cultura, e portabo festianan, e portabo idioma, cultura, clothing. Yes. For instance, heritage, think papimentabo patrimonio. Patrimonio cultural. Yes. For instance, if you share these things, sharing an interest in history and culture or heritage, yes, but also by observing national celebrations, yeah, yes, this brings people together. En het join junto durante il Festival Nacional en het join junto durante il Patrimonio Cultural Heritage. Ja, kijk het daar ejemplo dan, die eerste keer. Ja, Patrimonio Cultural. For instance, in Ceú. Yeah, when you have this feast in Curaçao, yeah, then it brings different generations together, young people, older people, and the older generation. But also music, music, tambour, the dancing, the rhythms, the music brings people together because a lot of the younger generations and the older generations know to appreciate this music. But also food can bring people together. Food is also a part of culture. Yeah? E come da un parte di patrimonio cultural. Yeah? And this brings people together. Yes? And also culture. Yeah? Culture, making music together. You see the picture, Iselin Callister, and also one of the older musicians on the island who brings the traditional music, music di zombie, tambour, and all the traditional music instruments of the plantation culture of Curaçao. He brings this to the future, to the culture of now. And these are also things that you see here next to me, are all examples of history and of cultural heritage. And cultural heritage can bring people together and bridge the generation gap. Yeah? It brings people together and it bridges the generation gap between three or two or more generations. By doing this, you minimize the effects of the generation gap by sharing heritage, yeah, patrimonio cultural, by participating in the national feasts, you bring people together. But the most important tool for minimizing the effects of the generation gap is encouraging communication, communication between the generations in which all parties feel they can be open and honest, transparente, honesto. Yeah. So you don't have to pretend to be somebody else. You can communicate together like these people do. And by communicating between different generations, you bridge, yeah, bota join junto, ibo bridge different generations together. Yeah. So each generation communicates in a different way, but by trying to communicate, you minimiza a generation gap. Yeah. Bota tra esse chiki. Yes. And you also encourage, anima, apoya, you encourage, you further motivate that different generations come together and that they try to understand each other while being of different generations. So this is a way of minimizing the effects of the generation gap. This is a way of minimizing the effects of the generation gap, minimisa. And communication is very important here, encouraging communication, which all parties feel they can be open and honest. And they don't have to pretend that they are exactly the same as their parents or grandparents. Openness y habilidad para papia honesto, tocante bo mayor, tocante bo contra bo wela, contra bo tawela, da hoop je importante. Para minimizar el efecto nan di distancia di generación. I hope this was helpful. It became a little bit of a longer video than I actually planned. It was, of course, about the generation gap. Now we know the generation gap. The gap is like a distance, a distancia, a buraco, between different generations. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to ask questions below or during class. And if you have suggestions for certain words or in Papiamento or my pronunciation, I'm fully open to that. Enjoy your day.